Guest of honor. But first, the journal entry. As a young man, I marveled at the stupidity and hypocrisy in the mortal age. In those days, the purposeful act of ending human life was considered the most heinous of crimes. How ridiculous. I know how hard it is to imagine that what is now humanity's highest calling was once considered a crime. How small-minded and hypocritical mortal man was, for even as they despised the enders of life, they loved nature, which in those days took every life ever conceived. Nature deemed that to be born was an automatic sentence to death, and then brought about that death with vicious consistency. We changed that. We are now a force greater than nature. For this reason, scythes must be as loved as a glorious mountain vista, as revered as a redwood forest, and as respected as an approaching storm. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Goddard. Chapter 20, Guest of Honor. Rowan had begun repeating this to himself like a mantra, hoping it would make it easier to digest, yet he seemed no closer to accepting it. Even under different scythes, the edict pronounced at conclave still stood. He would kill Citra at the end of their apprenticeship, or she would kill him. It was too juicy a bit of drama for the scythes to cancel just because they were no longer apprentices to Scythe Faraday. Rowan knew he could not kill Citra, and the only way to avoid the possibility would be to throw the competition, to perform so poorly between now and the final conclave that they had no choice but to grant scythehood to Citra. Then her first honor-bound duty would be to glean Rowan. He trusted she would make it quick, and that she would be merciful. The trick would be to not make his failure obvious. He must appear to be doing his best. No one must know his true plan. He was up to the task. I am going to die. Before that fateful day in the principal's office with Cole Whitlock, Rowan hadn't even known anyone who died. Gleaning had always been at least 3 degrees removed, the relative of someone who knew someone he knew, but over the past 4 months he'd witnessed dozens upon dozens of gleanings firsthand. I am going to die. 8 more months. He would see his 17th birthday, but not much more. Even though it would be his choice, the thought of being just another statistic for the science records irritated him. His life had been a whole lot of nothing. Lettuce kid. He had thought the label was funny, a badge of honor, but now it was an indictment. His was a life without substance, and now it would end. He would never have accepted Scythe Faraday's invitation to be a scythe apprentice. He should have never done it. He should have just gone with this unremarkable life, because then maybe, just maybe, he might have had the chance to do something remarkable with it in time. You've barely said a word since you got into the car. I'll talk when I have something to say. He rode with Scythe Volta in an off-grid Rolls Royce, perfectly maintained since the age of mortality, the scythe's yellow robe in stark contrast to the dark earth tones of the vehicle's interior. Volta didn't do the driving. There was a chauffeur. They wove through a neighborhood where the homes became increasingly larger and the grounds more vast until the residents disappeared entirely behind gates and ivy-covered walls. Volta, one of Goddard's disciples, had golden citrine gems embedded in his yellow robe. He was clearly a junior scythe, just a few years out of his apprenticeship, in his early 20s perhaps, still an age where numbering one's years felt important. His features and skin tone had an Afric leaning, which made the yellow of his garments seem even brighter. So is there a reason why you chose your robes to be the color of piss? Volta laughed. I think you'll fit in just fine. Scythe Goddard likes those close to him to be as sharp as his blades. Why do you follow him? The honest question seemed to bother him more than the urinary barb. Volta became the tiniest bit defensive. Scythe Goddard is a visionary. He sees our future. I'm much more interested in being part of the Scythedom's future than its past. Rowan turned back to the window. The day was bright, but the tinted windows dimmed it as if they were in the midst of a partial eclipse. You glean people by the hundreds? Is that the future you mean? We have the same quota as all other scythes, was all Volta said on the matter. Rowan turned back to Volta, who now seemed to have trouble keeping eye contact. Who did you train under? Rowan asked. Scythe Nero. Rowan seemed to recall Faraday chatting with Nero during conclave. They appeared to be on good terms. And how does he feel about you hanging out with Goddard? To you, he's honorable Scythe Goddard, Volta said, a bit indignant. And I couldn't care less how Scythe Nero feels. Old guard scythes have obsolete ideas. They're too set in their ways to see the wisdom of the change. He spoke of the change as if it was a tangible reality, a thing that by its very weight could make a person strong simply by pushing it. They stopped at a pair of wrought iron gates which slowly swung open to admit them. Here we are, said Volta. A quarter-mile driveway ended at a palatial estate. A servant greeted them and led them into the mansion. Rowan was immediately assaulted by loud dance music. There were people everywhere, reveling as if it were New Year's Eve. The whole estate seemed to undulate in the throes of the relentless beat, people laughing, drinking, and laughing some more. Some of his guests were Scythes, and not just Goddard's obvious disciples, other Scythes as well. There were also some minor celebrities. The rest seemed to be beautiful people who were probably professional party guests. His friend Tiger aspired to be one of those. A lot of kids said that, but Tiger really meant it. The servant led them out to back to a huge pool that seemed more suited to a resort than a home. There were waterfalls and a swim-up bar and more beautiful people happily bobbing. Scythe Goddard was in a cabana beyond the deep end, its front open to the festivities before him. He was attended by more than one fawning bimbotech. He wore his signature royal blue robe, but as Rowan got closer he could see it was a sheerer variation than the one he had worn at Conclave, his leisure robe. Rowan wondered if the man had a diamond-studded bathing suit in his wardrobe as well. "Rowan Damish," said Scythe Goddard as they approached. He told a servant passing with a tray of drinks to give Rowan a glass of champagne. When Rowan didn't take it, Scythe Volta grabbed one and put it in Rowan's hand before disappearing into the throng, leaving Rowan to fend for himself. "Please enjoy," said Goddard. "I serve only Dom Perignon." Rowan took a sip, wondering if an underage Scythe's apprentice could get marked down for drinking. Then he remembered that such rules didn't apply to him anymore, so he took another sip. "I arranged this little bacchanal in your honor," the Scythe said, gesturing to the party around them. "What do you mean, in my honor?" "Exactly that. This is your party. Do you like it?" The surreal display of excess was even more intoxicating than the champagne, but did he like it? Mostly he just felt weird, and weirder still to know that he was the guest of honor. "I don't know. I've never had a party before," Rowan told him. It was true. His parents had seen so many birthdays by the time Rowan was born they had stopped celebrating them. He was lucky if they even remembered to get him a gift. "Well then," said Scythe Goddard, "let this be the first of many." Rowan had to remind himself that this man with the perfect smile, secreting charisma instead of sweat, was the man who had manipulated him and Citra into mortal competition. But it was hard not to be dazzled by his style, and as distasteful as this spectacle was, it still made his adrenaline flow. The Scythe patted the seat beside him for Rowan to sit, and Rowan took his place at the Scythe's right hand. "Does the 8th commandment say that a Scythe shouldn't own anything but his robe, ring, and journal?" "Correct," said Scythe Goddard brightly, "and I own none of this. The food is donated by generous benefactors, the guests are here by choice, and this fine estate has been graciously loaned to me for as long as I choose to grace its halls." Upon the mention of the estate, a man cleaning the pool looked up at them for a moment before returning to his labors. "You should reread the commandments," Scythe Goddard said. "You'll find that nothing in them demands that scythes shun the creature comforts that make life worth living. That bleak interpretation by old guard scythes is a relic from another time." Rowan did not offer any further opinion on the subject. It was Scythe Faraday's humble and serious old guard nature that had made an impression on Rowan. Had he been approached by Scythe Goddard with enticements of rock star glamour in exchange for the taking of lives, he would have declined. But Faraday was dead, and Rowan was here, looking out on strangers that were here for his benefit. "If it's my party, shouldn't it have people I know?" "A scythe is a friend to the world. Open your arms and embrace it!" It seemed Scythe Goddard had an answer for everything. "Your life is about to change, Rowan Damish," he said, waving his arms to indicate the pool and the partiers and the servants and the elaborate spread of food just past the shallow end that kept being replenished. "In fact, it already has." Among the party guests was a girl who seemed markedly out of place. She was young, 9 or 10 at most, and completely oblivious to the party around her as she frolicked in the shallow end of the pool. "It looks like one of your guests brought their kids to the party," Rowan commented. "That," said Goddard, "is Esme, and you would be wise to treat her well. She is the most important person you will meet today." "How so?" "That chubby little girl is the key to the future, so she'd better hope she likes you." Rowan would have continued picking at Goddard's enigmatic responses, but his attention was grabbed by a beautiful party girl approaching in a bikini that seemed almost painted on. Rowan realized a moment too late that he was staring. He grinned and he blushed, looking away. "Ariadne, would you be so kind as to give my apprentice a massage?" "Yes, Your Honor," said the girl. Maybe later," Rowan said. "Nonsense," said the Scythe. "You need to loosen up. And Ariadne has magical hands, skilled in Swedish technique. Your body will thank you." She took Rowan by the hand, and that killed any resistance. He rose and let himself be led away. If our young man is pleased by your efforts, Scythe Goddard called after them, I will allow you to kiss my ring. As Ariadne led him to the massage tent, Rowan thought, in 8 months I am going to die, so perhaps he could allow himself a little indulgence along the way. I am disturbed by those who revere us far more than those who disdain us, to put us on a pedestal. Too many of us long to be one of us, and knowing that they can never be makes their longing even greater, for all scythes are apprenticed in their youth. It is either naivety in thinking that we are somehow of a higher order of being, or it is the product of a depraved heart, for who but the depraved would revel in the taking of life? For a time, years ago, there were groups who would emulate and imitate us. They would fashion robes like those of scythes. They would wear rings that looked similar to ours. For many, it was just costume play, but some would actually pretend to be scythes, fooling others, granting false immunity, everything short of gleaning. There are laws against impersonating workers in any profession, but no law preventing anyone from impersonating a scythe. Since the Thunderhead has no jurisdiction over the scythedom, it cannot pass any laws concerning us. It was an unforeseen glitch in the separation of scythe and state. However, it wasn't a glitch for long. In the year of the Stingray, at the 63rd World Conclave, it was decided that all such impostors should be gleaned on sight publicly and most violently. While one may expect such an edict to produce a bloodbath, very few gleanings ever took place. Once word got out, the posers shed their false robes and vanished into the woodwork of the world. To this day, the edict remains, but rarely needs to be invoked, because few are foolish enough to impersonate a scythe. And yet, now and again, I hear at conclave the rare tale of a scythe coming face to face with an impostor and having to glean them. Usually the conversation is about the inconvenience of it, how the scythe must then track down the impostor's family to grant immunity and such, but I wonder more about the impostor. What was it they hoped to achieve? Was it the lure of the forbidden? Were they enticed by the danger of being caught? Or did they simply wish to leave this life so badly that they chose one of the few direct paths to annihilation? From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie, Chapter 21, Branded. The party continued for another day, a festival of excess on all levels. Rowan joined in the revelry, but it was more out of obligation than anything. He was the center of attention, the celebrity of the moment. In the pool, beautiful people bobbed toward him. At the buffet, guests cleared the way so he could always be at the front of the line. It was awkward, yet heady. He couldn't deny that there was a part of him that enjoyed the surreal nature of celebratory attention, the lettuce elevated to a place of honor. It was only when the other scythes in attendance shook his hand and wished him luck in his mortal competition against Citra that he sobered and remembered what was at stake. He borrowed brief snippets of sleep in the cabana, always awakened by music or raucous laughter or fireworks. Then, late in the afternoon of the second day, when Scythe Goddard had had enough, he merely whispered so, and word spread quickly. In less than an hour, the guests left, and servants began to clean up the detritus of revelry from the eerily silent grounds. Now only the other residents of the estate remained, Scythe Goddard, his 3 junior scythes, the servants, and the girl Esme, who peered out of her bedroom window at Rowan like a wraith as he sat in Goddard's cabana, awaiting whatever came next. Scythe Volta approached, his yellow robe rippling in the breeze. "What are you still doing here?" he asked. "I have nowhere else to be," Rowan told him. "Come with me," Volta said. "It's time to begin your training." There was a wine cellar in the basement of the main house. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of bottles of wine rested in brick alcoves. A bare minimum of bulbs lit the space, casting long shadows and making the alcoves seem like portals to undisclosed hells. Scythe Volta led Rowan to the central chamber of the cellar where Goddard and the other scythes waited. Scythe Rand produced a device from her green robe. It looked like a cross between a gun and a flashlight. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. "It's a tweaker," Rowan told her. He'd had the occasion several years ago to have his nanites tweaked when his teachers decided his moodiness had crossed the line into depression. That was 5 or 6 years ago. The tweaking was painless and the effect subtle. He hadn't noticed much of a change, but everyone agreed that he had begun to smile more. "Arms out, legs spread," said Scythe Rand. Rowan did as he was told, and Scythe Rand passed the tweaker all over his body like some sort of magic wand. Rowan felt a mild tingling in his extremities that quickly faded. She stepped back, and Scythe Goddard approached. "Have you ever heard of the expression being made?" asked Scythe Goddard. "Or being jumped in?" Rowan shook his head, noticing that the other scythes had positioned themselves around him, leaving Rowan at the center of their circle. "Well, you are about to find out what it means." The other scythes then removed their cumbersome outer robes. Now down to their tunics and knickers they took aggressive stances. There was a look of determination on each of their faces, and maybe a little bit of joyous anticipation. Rowan knew it was about to happen an instant before it began. Scythe Chomsky, the largest of them, stepped forward and without warning swung his fist, connecting with Rowan's cheek so hard he spun around, lost his footing, and fell to the dusty floor. Rowan felt the shock of the punch, the jagged bolt of pain, and waited for the telltale warmth of his nanites releasing pain-killing opiates into his bloodstream, but relief didn't come. Instead, the pain swelled. It was horrible, overwhelming. Rowan had never experienced such pain. He never knew such pain could even exist. "What did you do?" he wailed. "What did you do to me?" "We turned off your nanites," Scythe Volta said calmly, "so you could experience what our ancestors once did." "That's a very old expression," Scythe Goddard told him. "To be painless is to be gainless." He gripped Rowan warmly on the shoulder. "And I wish you to gain much." Then he stood back, signaling the others to advance, and they began to beat Rowan to a pulp. Recovery without aid of healing nanites was a slow, miserable process that seemed to get worse before it got better. The first day Rowan longed to die. The second day he thought he actually might. His head pounded, his thoughts swam. He slept in and out of consciousness with little warning. It was hard to breathe, and he knew he had several broken ribs. And although Scythe Chomsky had painfully popped his dislocated shoulder back into place at the end of his beating, it still ached with each heartbeat. Scythe Volta visited him several times a day. He sat with Rowan, spoon-feeding him soup and blotting where it spilled from his split, swollen lips. There seemed to be a halo around him, but Rowan knew it was just optical damage that caused the effects. He wouldn't be surprised if he had detached retinas. "It burns," he told Volta as the salty soup spilled over his lips. "It does for now," Volta told him with genuine compassion, "but it will pass and you'll be better for it." "How could I be better for any of this?" he asked, horrified at how distorted and liquid his words sounded, as if he were speaking through the blowhole of a whale. Volta fed him another spoonful of soup. "6 months from now, you tell me if I was right." He thanked Volta for taking the time to visit with him when no one else did. "You can call me Alessandro," Volta said. "Is that your real name?" Rowan asked. "No, idiot. It's Volta's first name." Rowan supposed that as close as anyone got to knowing anyone inside them was this. "Thank you, Alessandro." On the evening of the second day, the girl, the one who Goddard was said was so important, came into his room in between deliriums. What was her name again? Amy, Emmy, oh yes, Esme. "I hate that they did this to you," she said with tears in her eyes, "but you'll get better." Of course he'd get better. He didn't have any choice in the matter. In mortal days, one died or recovered. Now there was only one option. "Why are you here?" "To see how you were getting on," she asked. "No, I mean here in the first place." She hesitated before she spoke, then she looked away. "Scythe Goddard and his friends came to a mall near where I lived. They gleaned everyone in the food court except me. Then he told me to come with them, so I did." It didn't explain anything, but it was the only explanation she offered, perhaps the only one she knew. From what Rowan could see, this girl served no discernible function at the estate, yet Goddard gave orders that anyone who ran afoul of her would be severely disciplined. She was not to be bothered in any way, and was allowed free run of the estate. She was the biggest mystery he'd encountered yet in Scythe Goddard's world. "I think you'll be a better scythe than the others," she told him, but gave no explanation as to why she thought so. Perhaps it was a gut feeling, but she couldn't be more wrong. "I won't be a scythe," he told her. She was the first person he confessed it to. "You will if you want to," she said, "and I think you'll want to." Then she left him to ponder the pain and the possibility. Scythe Goddard didn't show his face in Rowan's room until day 3. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Rowan wanted to spit at him, but knew it would hurt too much and might even bring about a second beating. "How do you think I'm feeling?" Rowan answered. He sat on the edge of the bed and studied Rowan's face. "Come see yourself." Then he helped Rowan out of bed, and Rowan hobbled to an ornate wardrobe on which was a full-length mirror. Rowan barely recognized himself. His face was so swollen it was pumpkin-like. Purple bruises all over his face and body were mottling to all shades of the spectrum. "Here is where your life begins," Goddard told him. "What you see is the boy dying. The man will emerge." "That's such a load of crap," Rowan said, not even caring what response it might evoke. Goddard merely raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps. But you can't deny this is a turning point in your life, and every turning point must be marked by an event, one that burns itself into you as indelibly as a brand." So now he was branded. Yet he suspected that this was just the beginning of a much larger trial by fire. The world longs to be like us, Goddard told Rowan, taking and doing what we choose with neither consequence nor remorse. They would steal our robes and wear them if they could. You have been given an opportunity greater than royalty, so at the very least it requires this rite of passage that I have provided for you. Goddard stood there, studying Rowan a few moments more. Then he pulled out the tweaker from his robes. Arms up, legs spread. Rowan took as deep a breath as he could and did as he was told. Goddard wanded him. Rowan felt tingling in his extremities, but when it was done, he didn't feel the warmth of opiates or the deadening of his pain. It still hurts, Rowan told them. Of course it does. I didn't activate your painkillers, just your healing nanites. You'll be good as new by morning and ready to begin your training. But from this moment on, you'll feel every measure of your body's pain. Why? Rowan dared to ask. What person in their right mind would want to feel that kind of pain? Right-mindedness is overrated, Goddard said. I'd rather have a mind that's clear than one that's right. In the business of death, we Scythes have no competition unless, of course, you consider fire. Fire kills just as swiftly as completely as a scythe's blade. It's frightening, but also somehow comforting to know that there's one thing the Thunderhead can't fix, one type of damage that revival centers are powerless to undo. Once one's goose is cooked, it is truly and permanently cooked. Death by fire is the only natural death left. It almost never happens, though. The Thunderhead monitors heat on every inch of the planet, and the fighting of fires often begins before one can even smell smoke. There are safety systems in every home and every office building with multiple levels of redundancy just in case. The more extreme tone cults try to burn their deadish to make it permanent, but ambidrones usually get to them first. Isn't it good to know that we are all safe from the threat of the inferno? Except, of course, when we're not. From the Gleaning Journal of H.S. Curie.